Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the ANU Life Global Ministries Sabbath Insight. I am Chief Yuya, also known as the Jegna, or the Chief and the Head Coordinator of the ANU Life Global Ministries, and most importantly, the ANU Nation. I want to welcome you and thank you for coming through. And this time, we're coming to the end of this Gregorian, and we're at the last insight, in fact, for this Gregorian. And I wanted to sort of round out some of our discussions around just thought, the way we're thinking. And, we started this sort of little mini journey or expedition talking about the Anu mind and having the mind of the Anu. And it's so important to sort of link your rationale and your reason and your emotional and energetic and your spiritual body with that mind of the Anu, so that you can achieve not only oneness, but you can achieve truth and consciousness. You really don't achieve truth until you're aligned with the divine mind. Outside of that, you may have facts, but you have facts without context. So once you align yourself with divinity, now you actually have context for what it is that you're experiencing, or you're seeing, or you're hearing, or you're feeling. You have the proper context. And that's something I wanted to really take a look at in our session today, is to kind of look at the value and the importance of a mental context and a mental framework that allows us to approach all of this information in a way where it's actually sensible and it's relevant to our work. And I can say most pointedly, I am speaking to those of us who have come up from mental slavery and come up from a mental death, and who have come into a place where we've been resurrected into the knowledge of self, and we're looking to further explore where our power base is. And when you're living within a Western dominated society, within an Anglosphere, you're never going to be directed to your actual power. In fact, you're going to be taught to have a great disdain for what it is that actually makes you powerful. And everyone else can point at your power and say, no, stay away from that, never, because it's not their power. It's perfectly fine. So if you come to find out that one of your structures and one of your modalities of power is ancestral veneration, of course, if you're living within a society or a place where you and your ancestors were once held down and suppressed and objectified, then someone could say ancestral veneration. Oh, no, don't ever do that. Oh, no, no, no. Because that's not where they draw their power, but it may be where you not only draw your power, but where you and your people find a connectedness and find a oneness. Even if it's something as simple as, before we drink out this bottle, we pour a little bit out for our friends who aren't here anymore. But that's something that still serves as a unifier, as simplistic as it may seem in nature. So really having the right context and mind frame is so critical to applying everything you're learning, And I wanted to speak to that, as we're kind of, like I said, rounding out this whole mind of Anu. And I could see if you had an opportunity to tune into last strong segment, where I spoke about the distinction, that fine mist barely detectable by the human eye, but I spoke about the hell, the rain, the snow, and how it expresses itself into our conscious awareness, or expresses itself into our conscious awakening. And how each one gives a different sort of message in a different sort of way. Then you'll see that very similar to other folks of my own kin. A lot of times, the examples that I may provide, or that have been provided to me by my great elders, are going to be based around nature. And oftentimes that nature sort of context is because we understand that our core nature as people is perfect. So we don't seek for perfection outside of ourselves. but rather we seek for alignment outside of ourselves. So we may look at something in nature and say, oh, okay, I see how the seasons work. I see how my seasons work. I see how my horoscope or my horoscope works by looking at the transitions and the vacillations and the oscillations that are happening around me within the natural environment. But if my starting point of understanding is that I am a completely flawed and imperfect being made by a completely flawed and imperfect originator, then I would seek to create perfection outside of me. And I would probably do that through my advances in technology, though they may be completely devoid of any level of morality or consciousness. I have to correct what was designed broken, right? So, understanding the context of our learning and the context of our understanding is so valuable to understanding even the examples that we may give, like snow or rain or a hailstorm, or even understanding, as we learn in our lessons, why are there earthquakes? Because there are men who have tried to create and shift weather patterns. I'll give it to you that way. I'll go over the lessons at another time, or that's really more of an internal sort of ANU conversation. But setting off bombs and creating earthquakes, right? So this desire to find perfection as opposed to let perfection be, or to uncover the perfection, as one would say, let there be light. And I saw that the light was good. If I let it, it was already there. I just had to let it come forth. I didn't have to create light. It was there and it was good already. So when we speak about the educar or the education of the individual and what comes forth from the soul, it's a letting that comes forth if we acknowledge within a contextual understanding that we were already designed right, but our flawed ways are the thinking of the stinking thinking, as we say, the stinking thinking that we took on from our sojourn and our journey through this fleshly sort of vehicle, as well as this worldly consciousness. So I wanted to hit a couple of points, and like I said, I did a bit of a shorter form in our last segment. It doesn't look like y'all are feeling that too much. I only went about 16 minutes. I said, let me try something. Let me be a little bit more brief. Allow people to go experience more of their day. I'm only going to take up 16 minutes, and yeah, it doesn't look like anybody was feeling. But that's supposed to be the thing on YouTube and stuff. Your shorter form content. I mean, although over 10 minutes is considered long form, but your shorter form content is supposed to be preferred. But I guess not for me. But nonetheless, you try different things and see, right? I am a scientist by nature, and I love research, I love laboratory work, and I love experimenting. So, I'm always going to try different things to see, different experiments. And really, that's what this existence and this journey is about. It's an experiment. It's a quest, but it's still an experiment, So nonetheless, moving forward. So yeah, speaking about the value of really understanding the context, around the first of the years, with the Gregorian year, like I said, this is not necessarily my first of year, but around this time is usually when we start to experience most of our shocking events. This one's going to transition, this one's going to jail, this one's, murdered, this disaster occurred, so forth and so on. And what happens is that tends to keep the populace in this consistent state of stupefaction. It's like if someone was shocking you with an electric shocker. After the first shock, you'd struggle to get your bearings to reorientate. And then once you reorientate, you say, okay, what the heck is going on? Then you get shocked again and it's whoa. But when you constantly get shocked, you never get a chance to actually rebalance, get your footing, and to get your orientation back in place. And that is truly the purpose of all of these things that occur around us to keep us in a consistent and continual state of shock, so we can never ground ourselves in what reality truly is. And part of that intention becomes successful because many of us are trained in a way where we look at symptom and never look at cause. Even those of us who seek to topple oppression, whether it be pseudo white supremacy, racism ideology, or whether it be globalism, capitalism, imperialism, these different things that come in front of us. Many of those of us who seek to topple that, we attack it from a perspective of looking at what happened. This was a shame. Look at what happened. But whoever takes the same amount or more time to study the mentality of the racist, study the mentality of the oppressor, study the mentality of one who would push globalism, which is colonialism, of the colonist, of the colonizer, excuse me, but really taking the time to say, let me understand the mindset and the pathology of one who would engage in those sort of acts. So once you take the time to understand the pathology of said person, it's very difficult to shock you. So now you're no longer running around in a state of shock. You're somewhere and you find out, man, the police just brutalized this woman, or this woman went and she was pregnant, she went into labor and she went to the hospital and the baby didn't make it, or, the mother and baby didn't make it. She wasn't given the proper treatment, or this man was just walking down the street minding his business and he was attacked by racist police officers, policy agents rather. You're no longer surprised because you understand the mentality of those who are pulling the strings of the puppets within the system, right? But if you don't take the time to understand that mentality, then you're constantly angered, you're constantly in fear, you're constantly shocked, you're constantly discouraged, and all of the vigor and the joy for living is completely extracted from you. And you don't really know the starting point to begin to find some protection, healing, and safety in your own life, because it's like you're dealing with this wild animal and you have no concept of how this animal thinks, but and I quote it often, but it's like what Blade said in the movie Blade, when he said, once you know an animal, you know how that animal thinks, you know what that animal will do. So thinking, from a larger context or from a divine context, and understanding the thinking of a people will help you to understand the context of what's being said. So even when I'm teaching something, a lot of times people will misinterpret because they don't understand my context, or don't care to understand it, or they assume that we're coming from the same context. This is one of the biggest tricks of oppression and racism, is the presumption of context and false rhetorics or rhetoric that has nothing to do with the actual intention. Rhetoric that hides intention, So one of the rhetorics that we find that we face a lot once we get closer to understanding the context of our own divinity, we start hearing terms like universal or universality. So if I start to speak about the history of my own people or the value of myself, as an original man, I immediately will be told, or if I even speak about some of the tragedies that individuals who look like me occurred, went through, if I start to speak about the Ma'afa and the triangle trade and things like that, the first thing someone's going to say is, well, at some point, all nations, all ethnic groups had slaves. Everybody owned slaves. Everybody went through slavery at some point. It's going to be made universal. If I speak about the purposeful undermining and destruction of my family unit, the family unit of my people, or how before the 1960s, 80% of, my people's families were together and male led. Somebody will say, well, we all went through that some part. I mean, we're all dealing with the effects of third and fourth wave feminism and this and that, and it's just a balancing of things. It's almost like the all lives matter sort of rhetoric. But what exists underneath that? What exists underneath that is a desire to maintain a power dynamic. That's just the truth of it. Someone transitioned recently, and it's interesting again because a lot of times the lack of knowing and the lack of study leads people to sort of celebrate what they have no business celebrating and to sort of condemn what they have no business condemning. You know, um, but like the poet and activist Nikki Giovanni transitioned recently, and I saw like all these posts going up where they were like, "Yeah, the Queen," and this and that, and and you know, uh, again, I'm not a troublemaker, so I tend to, like, oh, okay, that's all right. Like, don't bring it to me. But someone mistakenly brought that to me and was like, yeah, I know you're into the arts and stuff, and Nikki Giovanni, and I was like, and well, isn't that? Oh, you mean Nikki Giovanni, the staunch feminist? She was one of the major proponents for destroying the Nubian family. She was used so much by the system. I mean, people always replay that famous conversation they have a clip of between she and James Baldwin, where she was just talking foolishness. Foolishness. But people oftentimes don't approach things with any sort of critical thought. So they'll see these two people who they think are great minds because the system put these two people in front of you. Nikki Giovanni, who had no interest in men, who was married to a European woman who she called her wife, and James Baldwin, who had a well-known public taste for Caucasian men, right? So he was someone who had no interest in intimate affairs with women, and she was someone who had no interest in intimate affairs with men. So, and not to say that that's the point where the cut is, but then let's look at the work. Let's look at the things that she advocated for. She advocated for the destruction of the family. You got to know the history of people. So, oh, Nikijima. So, coolest thing about her was her name. That's pretty much where it ends for me. And for anyone else who knows better. And I know there'll always be people, it's just like when with the Billy Carson thing, and it's gonna be people in the comments are like, but nah, you go think, you go study. I know what I'm saying. You go. Because we're not in the same place, I promise you. We're not. If you are advocating for things like that, some people, a lot of times who watch and come along, they'll be like, man, I've been on this conscious thing, since 2000 and something. If you've been on this conscious trip since 2000 and something, we ain't in the same place. Go back to 19 something and then come talk to me, and you might be able to come talk to me. You might be able, if you're someone like myself who was able to witness Bobby Hemmett's first lecture, a smaller Bobby, then come talk to me, So, again, a lot of times we don't have the divine context for what's actually happening. So we celebrate things we got no business celebrating, and we condemn things that we have no business condemning because we lack context, and context comes through our divine understanding. And it comes to knowing, first of all, our origins, and then knowing the mission that we were sort of formulated to fulfill here in this particular form. Like I said, a lot of times our conceptions are coming from our oppressor purposely. As you may have heard me or remember me saying many years ago, that the greatest way to control the people is to get them in your mind. Once you give them your mind, you give them your fears, you give them your anxieties, you give them your pathology, you give them all of the things that you hold sacred, or all of the things that you fear. And they begin to believe that these are of their own conception. It's like if you're speaking to someone, and I'm sure many of you who have walked this conscious walk for some time have encountered this experience. You're speaking to somebody about something that has to do with culture, or something that has to do with maybe a deeper awareness of what spirituality truly is, or it could even be a deeper awareness of the origins of a belief system. And the person will say, like, do you believe in God? And it's like, the conversation's over. You know that. Because whether you say yes or whether you say no, because you have now answered this fallacious question, the question has no basis. It's not even a question that makes sense, but it's a question that's given to that individual by their enslavers. So they know how to use certain rhetoric and certain terms, because they all use the same exact terms, certain terms to bring a conversation to a place where they feel comfortable. Do you believe in God? And the thing is, like, there's this magic, there's this magic property that individuals who don't know ascribe to the word God. God. Oh, okay. Once you say God, well, God told me, well, I believe in God. Well, I believe there's a God, and God. So it shuts everything down. But if you were to have a conversation with someone and you said, do you believe in Olodumare? Would it have the same effect? You see, would it have the same effect as do you believe in God? Right? The average person would probably like, I don't, what you talking about? Right? Which may be a term and an idea that could actually be closer to their own nationality and ethnicity than the word God. Right? If you say, do you believe in Yahuwah? What's that? And even if you explain what the title Yahweh is, I bet you they'll still want to say God. Bet you they'll still feel far more comfortable with the magical term God, because their conception has been given to them by their oppressors. You see, and their oppressors, as our dear Sheikh Diop used to tell us, like, you primarily had like this really, it was sort of inherent almost to their to their psychology, was this xenophobia that you experience with people who were in Northern Europe as well as in the West. Between the West and Northern Europe, those individuals suffered from such extreme xenophobia, which is, a fear of strangers, but oftentimes their fear relates to hostility because of their spiritual context, their conceptualization of their God. So anything that is not them, or anything that is foreign to them, is something to be afraid of, something to now approach with hostility, to assume hostility from it. Whereas you look at many of the, certainly the West African tales, you hear about tales of sharing. In the East, someone came upon certain information, or they were divinely bestowed with a certain wisdom at birth. Whether it be Urumila, whether it be Tahuti, whether it be Asar, who traveling around the world, in our Medu, when we speak about Tameri, or ancient Kemet, as some may call, or Egypt for some of you, but Kemet or Tameri is a much better and a much more appropriate term. But Asar had information, and he traveled around and shared it with people. Orumila had information in the form of the Corpus Odu, or the Odu Ifa, and he shared it with people, right? And then you start to learn about different concepts of that in the West, and you don't have anybody who shared anything. No one shared anything. They went out and they converted people. However they could convert them, however that needed to happen, they went out and they converted, but they didn't go out and they share. Even when they speak about their supposed Messiah, the Messiah went out and shared information and walked from town to town and not only shared information, but showed and proved this is I am who and what I say I am. But let me share some information with you. And if you don't want the information, I'm myself, and I'm even advising my crew, shake the dust from your sandals and keep walking. But when you look at it from a Western perspective, convert. Go out and convert, right? So many have taken on that sort of conceptualization. So again, if you're speaking to them about truth, they'll say, do you believe in God? I often answer, say, I don't believe in anything. Well, see, that's the problem, brother. That's not the problem. That's not the problem. That's the blessing. That's because I'm no longer mentally dead. I'm not a child looking for a fairy tale. I don't believe in anything. I know or I don't know. And if you say you believe in God, God is a title. God is a title, just like Yah is a title. So why would you assume that no one else on the planet was able to conceive of a divinity other than you? So people will say it's God versus Allah. These are two titles for a divinity. So my title against your title. It's Mr. versus Senor. Mrs. versus Senora. Does that make sense? If you look at it in that way, does it make any sense? You see, it makes no sense because you're battling title against title, but you assume that the title, because you don't study, you don't even know that that's not a name. God is not a name, you know. But you assume that the conceptualization that you were given by your enslavers is automatically superior to all others. And see, in the Western concept, in the Western sort of mental pathology, those things that are different must be made inferior. And there's a reason that they must be made inferior. So if I have a religion and my religion is art, you know, or it's led by an archon that I call God, and you have a religion and your religion is headed by an archon that you call Onima, you know, then mine must be better because I don't know what Onima is. Or your archon may be Chi, which is another name, the Igbo, you know, archetype, or Granbois, if you're speaking about the Haitian Vodun, Granbois. I don't know what Granbois is, but I know what God is. I think I know what God is, right? So therefore, I have to somehow make yours inferior, and there's a reason. So I'll make yours inferior by associating mine with civilization, right? Well, if you're civilized and you're living a good life and you're living a clean life, then you are subservient to God. You believe in God. And any language or any concept outside of that is less than. And I need to bring you up to where I'm at. So if you are practicing a concept that's less than, it only could be because of one reason. You are of a lower IQ. You have less intelligence than I do. So if you have less intelligence than I do, and if you are of a lower IQ, then my job is now to civilize you because you are inferior to me. You see, the Western concept and the Western pathology only works from, or only speaks from, the concept of conflict, right? So there's got to be a greater and there's a lesser, and the greater must dominate and conquer the lesser. That's what has to happen, right? They don't work in complement, right? So if you look at even Let's look at a more Eastern form or West African form, or we can look at even, again, we can go to Orisha, we can go to Abosoms. There is a concept or an idea there that there may be small forces and there may be larger forces. So as opposed to the personification of a deity that is done in the West, there's an alignment with the force of a divine power or divine presence, right? Now, those two words may not seem like that big a deal, but they can be the whole root of your colonized and enslaved thinking. Personification versus idealization of a force. See, once we say God, are we conceptualizing a force, or we conceptualize a personality, and most importantly, a person? So as soon as we conceptualize a person, we can now align it with ourselves, and we can align it with our own really Eurocentric. That's really what it boils down to. But we can align it with our own Eurocentric imperative, right? So everything has to come from that imperative. So God is great. So that means God is a man. God has to be a man because God is great, right? So what may exist beneath that is going to be feminine in nature because it's not as powerful as this great thing, because we know that women are not as powerful as men. Right? Now, again, I'm speaking from the Eurocentric perspective, right? And how divinity is personified. So that which is more powerful must, or in our perception, it must conquer and dominate that which we perceive as being less powerful. So let's look at in a small example. If we look at the converse of that and we look at compliments, if you are on the beach enjoying a day with your family, and a soft breeze is blowing. It's warm out. Soft breeze is blowing, cooling everything off. You probably really appreciate that breeze. Like, oh man, it's beautiful out here. It's like picturesque. This smooth breeze comes and just cools everything off, right? And then if a large gust of wind comes, you might say, oh, time at the playa is done. Like it's time to bring the familia. Let's go back home. Like the wind is too strong. We can't be out here. Now, when you just realize that there was a soft breeze and then there was a more gusting push of wind, do you imagine that larger gust or that more ferocious gust, that it is somehow victimizing, conquering, and dominating the softer breeze? Or do you just recognize that these two things live within the same ecosystem? That there's a soft breeze and there's a stronger breeze. It is what it is, right? But now let's take it from a Eurocentric perspective or a Western perspective. That soft breeze would be female. That strong gust of wind would be male. And a strong gust of wind must have dominated and destroyed the smaller breeze. And now it's present, you see. So if you take that sort of thinking and that sort of ideation and you apply it to everything, then you'll understand how xenophobia is acted out in the most hostile of ways. How you could have a group of people who will not understand something, not have an awareness of something, and what they do in response to not having that awareness or not having that understanding, they attack that thing. Because for them, all things that are different have to be dominated. And if they can't first be dominated, you have to figure out how to dominate. So if we come across these people who are thinking from an Eastern mind, or they're thinking from a more Afrocentric worldview, and their conception of a stranger is compassion, right? Because if you live in a beautiful place, let's say you love the place you live right now, right? And I come travel to where you live, and where you live is thousands of miles from my home. And your assumption is that my home is just as wonderful as your home is. What would be the first thing you would probably think if I was maybe blown off course or, wandering? And you'd say, man, I hope you can get back home because you're so far from home. I hope you can get back to your people. So you would treat me with compassion and you would treat me with love because you feel sorry for me. I'm so far away from home, right? But what happens if I'm so far away from home, I'm in your home now, you're treating me very kindly. You're bringing me food, you're washing my clothes, you've helped me even build a little temporary shelter to shelter me from the elements or whatever, mended my clothes. And instead of repairing my ship to leave, I begin to build a military fort on your land. You start seeing me stacking sandbags, putting stones together for defense, building armaments, and you're like, wouldn't I want to go home? Like, what am I like? You're dumbfounded. This person is building a military fort on my land, right? But I assume that they want to get back home to their family, to their loved ones, and to their beautiful land, like how I have beautiful land. That may have been the conception, you see. But then you have another group of people who may be functioning again from a Western mindset, who are just going around looking to dominate. And once they see something that is unlike them, they can call it uncivilized. They can call it savage. And because it is civilized and unsavage, I have a divine responsibility to conquer it. But first, I must claim it, or I must classify it as less than me. You see? Now, again, using the wind example, you may see wind and say the wind is lesser than the greater, but the greater doesn't necessarily have to conquer it, because they are functioning within a complementary dynamic. So even when we look at our relationship functions, oftentimes we're looking at relationship functions from the perspective of who controls who conquers who. As long as you're the conqueror, everything is good to go. I'm going to share something on that. Not now. I'll do an addendum video, on that. But the fallacy and the sort of very sick and demonic thinking when it comes to that, But you have to take a look at context. So where are you getting this context? Like for many of us, we speak about the fall or the destruction of the original family or the melanin-rich family. And we say, men should be out providing and women, their places in the home, and they should be in the home taking care of the children and making sure that sort of front is held down. Okay, where did you gain that conception? Where did that actually come from? That a woman's place is in the home, right? And I am not arguing whether that is true or false, but what I'm saying is that did we look at that within larger context, if it's really true or false? For me personally, what I have witnessed in my travels throughout the continent in more indigenous spaces, not necessarily the cities, is that the men are at home more or close to the home, and the women are out more. The women usually are out in the marketplace selling goods. That's typically outside of the house. It's not usually in the front yard. They are typically somewhere in the market, whether they own storefronts, whether they own just little zinc. They got shacks made out of zinc and 2x4s, or they're at the actual market and they have booths. And the men oftentimes will farm. The men may hunt. Again, in indigenous spaces, they may fish, but they're not typically traveling around doing commerce. The women may travel really far to not only we could say wholesale, to get goods wholesale or to sell them at retail, but the women will often travel, Now, again, that's one context, right? And I'm not saying that is the de facto context for all indigenous people or for all melanin rich people. But what I'm saying is that we should be questioning how we perceive the way we're supposed to move, knowing that, very similar to the movie Inception, that we've had ideas planted in us while we were asleep. And some of us are still asleep. And the whole goal and the whole mission is to make sure that you do not wake up. Because if you wake up, we're in trouble. We have to keep you asleep, or at least keep you asleep long enough for these ideas to take root. You see? So then when you wake up, you don't even remember that you were in a dream state. You wake up and all of a sudden you have a reverence to a word like God. Or somebody says love. They use, like I said, for certain words people use, and you just love, God. And you immediately just cower in front of it. And you don't know why. Because someone programmed you with those ideas while you were still in your dream state. Or someone speaks to you about what a family should look like. And you say, yeah, the man goes out and does this and the woman does that. Yeah. Who gave you that conception? Because you may have been given that conception by rich families on the planet who knew that if you had a certain dynamic within your family, they could make more money off of you. Just like they make a lot of money off of divorce. They make a lot of money off of illiterate children. They make a lot of money off of weak males, effeminized males. They make a lot of money off of weak males, you see. And the aspects of your masculinity that are not weak, but actually feminine, because feminine is also strong. Masculine is strong, but feminine is strong as well. It's just strong in a different sort of way, but it's strong. But the aspects of a man that typically are feminine are of no profit to the greater society, so they're demonized. They're just demonized. As a father, if I love to give hugs and kisses to my children, I'm soft. Because there's no way to really capitalize on that. There's no way to really make money off of that. A father who gives hugs and kisses to his children, his grown boys. What? You hug and kiss to your grown. Well, I can't make any money from that, so let's demonize it. See, there are many aspects to us as a people, as multidimensional and full people that are cut off because they can't be monetized. There are individuals that can't turn them into commodities. So they tell you don't be that thing. Let this be that thing, or let it not be. That's why, it's so very interesting. If you go to study, for me as a musician, and I've been playing music since I was very, very young, like 7 years old, right? Playing proficiently since I was about 11. And that was always the thing when I would get introduced, to people who maybe were not as deeply entrenched in music. When people would say, hey, this boy here, he can play. Like he does that. People say what they say, but whatever complimentary thing they would say, there would always be someone, and they would say, there would be two questions I would be asked every time. Do you read music? Can you play classical? Those were always the two. I'm telling you, like, I would always know that those questions were coming. I would always know, like, as soon as somebody says, or if somebody would say, like, this boy is a genius. This boy play a bunch of instruments and he plays them well. He could play for real. Like that, when they would say things like that, there would always be someone, can you read music too? Oh, do you play classical? Every time. I happen to be able to read music. I taught myself to read. Well, that's not totally true. I did receive a couple of lessons when I was younger. I feel like, in the school band, I played drums when I first started in the school band. Drum notation is easy though. You just gotta, it's not like you gotta count the staff. But I used to ignore the notation because I could always memorize the rhythms anyway. That was more fun. So I can't really say, I was introduced, like a piece of sheet music was put in front of me. No, but actually, no, when I was around 7 or 8, yeah, I actually did have a guitar lesson where he taught me the notes on the staff. But I don't even remember. I would just get books out the library and teach myself. It's not difficult to learn how to read music at all. It's not difficult. so yeah, I always knew how to read music, and then I took it very serious at one point because as a gigging musician, I was always told when I was younger that you would get more gigs if you knew how to read music, and in particular what we call spot reading. And spot reading is when like someone hands you a sheet of music, and like it could be right there in the studio session or right there at the gig. You're reading while you're playing. You're reading and playing, but you're doing it in a way where it sounds like you already know the piece of music, right? So that's called spot reading. Because most of the time when you're reading a piece of music, you got to go through it a couple of times to like, and you might even write your own notations at certain points. Do this, do that, do that. Because it's not so easy to read a note and then translate it quick, or read a rhythm, or So I would really, really train a lot in spot reading. Like as soon as you see the music, play it like you already know it. So I know how to read music, right? That doesn't make me a real musician. That doesn't make me a real musician at all. These were things that I learned because I wanted to monetize my talent. I wanted to be able to get hired for more studio session gigs, or get hired for like more jazz gigs where you would definitely have a sheet of music in front of you. But usually even with jazz, you use the cheat sheets, because it's all improvisation. So you just, here we're G major here, then we go from G major here to E minor, from E minor here to B minor, from B minor here to C sharp major. And you just do what you do in each one. You don't have to know each note exact, as long as you just follow the chord changes, right? So, this is what was always very silly to me about that question, even as a very young man. And I would never answer in a way that was disrespectful. I would just, yeah, I can play classical and I could read music, but this is what was always disrespectful to me. You're speaking about a style of music when you say classical. And I know people, who are dancers. I come from a dancing, in my family, it's dancers. And, like classical is considered ballet, classical ballet. A style that was, popularized, or really founded in Russia, right? If you can't dance classical or you can't play classical, you're not considered official. But this is the thing that was always, kind of would gnaw at me as a young man. I would say the rhythms that I play in the park with my father and my uncles, those rhythms are older than your classical music. So we're in the park, and we're what you may consider African drums, right? We that's not what we called it, but that's what people would hear and say, "Oh, those African drums," right? But those rhythms and those chants that we used to sing in the park and we would play in the park were far older than the music that you would call classical. So why would your classical be the standard when it's actually not the classic? Because it's classical for you. It's as far back as you can go, right? And I'm not going to get into the whole piece right now about how the Moors actually brought that music to Europe. I won't do that. That's another topic, but we'll say that that's theirs for now. So you had that, and that's your beginnings sonically, and you want to make your sonic beginnings my sonic beginnings. And if I don't own and embrace your sonic beginnings as my own sonic beginnings, then I have lost my legitimacy as an artist. So if I was to say, no, I don't play classical music, I play Ethiopian jazz. It could be, and sometimes I would answer like that. They would say, "Oh, do you play classical?" And I'd say, "No, I play soul music, rhythm and blues and soul." Right? Just to like get out of my face. And whenever I would answer like that, it would always be like, "Oh, okay." If they would say, "Do you read music?" Sometimes I would just say, "I play by ear." I'd be lying because I do read music, but I'd say, "I play by ear." Oh, okay. Now it's not real. Even though aren't you listening to the music by ear? And The most amazing and most talented musicians that I've ever played with in my life played by ear. You know, when I came into the realm of greater musicianship, and what I mean by greater musicianship, not me being the greater musician, but being around much higher caliber musicians, most of them played by ear. You know, most of them, and I'd be learning songs with them, and I'd be sitting there with my charts, writing out the changes and stuff, and they'd be looking over me like, okay. Like, you just can't remember what I got to this day, I got terrible music memory. And I think that's from years of writing everything out, you know. But anyway, so that's the context that we look at oftentimes that distorts what it exactly is that we're doing. So we're taking on someone else's mindset and someone else's concept, which is an incomplete and deficient mindset. You know, it's incomplete. You think about the functional purpose of some of the ancient Malian rhythms. You know, when you look at what those drummers from Mali were doing, or even some of the drummers from Nigeria were doing on the bata, and the purpose for bata drumming, the purpose of the djembe. You see, it wasn't to soothe, you know, a savage beast. That wasn't the purpose. Opening up portals, opening up sacred portals, opening up communication, worshiping in a way that is encompassing nature now, is encompassing a full experience. But you know, why would we never hold that as anything sacred or anything higher? And I'm going to tell you why. This is the reason. Because of Plato. Plato once said that reason is better than appetite, right? And what he meant by reason is better than or superior to appetite. Appetite is synonymous with emotions. So what he's saying is that your ability to reason, or I think, therefore I am, if we go into the Descartes sort of way of rationalizing one's existence. Plato was saying that your rational and reasonable mind is superior to your emotional body. So again, there's no level of complementarity in Western or Eurocentric thinking. So they don't work together, but what Plato would say is that one has to learn to conquer their emotions through their reason and their logic. The emotions are something that needs to be conquered. And why would the emotions need to be conquered? Because they didn't understand emotions. They didn't understand them. So they're always going to demonize and condemn something that they can pull no power from. You see, they can pull no power from it. So, think of the similarities, and I'll go back to music. I know I use music as examples a lot, but it's something that is very sacred to me, and I spend a lot of time inside of, right? You listen to some of the music in the South, and lyrically, like hip-hop music, there's nothing there. You know, y'all can feel however y'all want about it, but we know lyric bars are the North. We know that. Now, of course, you always have your exceptions to the rule. I'm not going to say you don't have exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, lyrically, New York has always dominated when it comes to the depth and the complexity of lyrics. And the South has dominated when it just comes to the feel. Look at how they respond to their own music. Look at how they act when their own music comes on. That shows you the power of the appetite. And oftentimes the power of the appetite is much more than the power of the reason and the rationale. So we could say the reason and the rationale would be the complexity and the depth of lyrics. You go down south to have a song like shake it, shake it, shake your stanky leg, and the whole club will go out, shake your stanky leg. It'd be something so stupid. But there's soul. There's soul in it. You see. And there are people who can relate and connect to that soul. And then there's people who have spent so much time in reason and rationale that they can't feel the soul. They don't know what the heck is going on. Right? They just like, shake your stanky leg. What? Why everybody getting so amped over? Like they're not even saying nothing. It's the feeling. It's the way it hits you in your chest. It's the soul of that thing. So there's a complementarity. Now you may take an artist like a Big Crit, or you may take a artist like a Killer Mike, or you may take a artist like a Andre 3000, and you'll then pull a combination of soul and rationale, where it's like you can't say they're not lyrical. They're definitely lyrical, and you can't say that their music doesn't make you feel something, because you feel it. You see, those are examples of an Afrocentric projection of artistry. You see, but if I can only feel one of those things, then I'm going to demonize the other thing. So if I can only read a sheet of music and copy along, then that's what I'm going to praise. If somebody says, hey man, close that book and feel the pocket. That's what we call it. Feel what we're doing. Feel the groove, feel the energy, and then jump in on what you're supposed to be doing. I can't feel it, I can't hear it. So it must be wrong. I got to conquer it and destroy it. How many of us approach our worldview and our conception of spirituality and learning in the same exact way, right? Because if you can't find complementarity between appetite and reason, then you'll find no complementarity between male and female. It will be one or the other, and one has to dominate the other. And if Plato has instilled in you in your dream state that the reason must dominate the emotion, or the reason must dominate the appetite, then in your mind, when you awake from your slumber, or you might still be within your domain, within your slumber, then you will say the man must dominate and conquer the woman. And that's the only way that things will work properly, is if I conquer that which I perceive to be lesser, or that which I perceive to be less civilized than I am, or that which I do not understand. I must conquer it. And then you as a woman may say the same thing. You'll start crying and you'll get mad at everybody else because you feel emotional. You start apologizing and getting angry. Look at how you got me. You're a female. You're supposed to be emotional. Chill out. Chill out. Go be emotional. Go be in your feelings. We say phrases like that now that they like it's something wrong. Oh, you in your feelings. Be in your feelings. Be in them. Sometimes I'm in my feelings. A couple of days ago, I was in my feelings. I was just in my feelings. Just feeling what I wanted to feel. I was thinking about some of my ancestors. I just had like an ancestral moment. And like they all like, I'm like, what? Like they all visiting at one time. Like, what? Did y'all plan this? Like, what do you want? Like they all just showing up. You know, they're in my dreams and I'm waking up and I'm seeing them. I'm seeing images and visions across the water. Going to sleep, seeing them some more. Like, give me a break. And I was in my feelings. And I wasn't trying to shoo those feelings away. I wasn't embarrassed about those feelings. I didn't feel awkward about those feelings. I was in my feelings. And then I took all those feelings and I brought them to my shrine and my knees. Here you go. This is what I saved up. Here. Now, does that make me a girl? No. Doesn't make me a girl. Does it make me someone who should be conquered? No. Try it. It just makes me someone who understands the complementary nature of the different components of my dynamic system. My dynamic system is a community unto itself, and that community has to work with itself and not against itself. Because if not, then you'll have a revolution, you see, and there'll be a toppling over of the head, and we don't want that. We want harmony. We don't want internal rebellion, where your ego is now rebelling against your emotions, or your emotions are now rebelling against your logic, or your logic is rebelling against your sense of drive. No, I want my ego, my drive, my emotion, and my logic to all work with each other. I want there to be harmony. And if one needs extra nurturing at some times during the season, I'm gonna give it some more nurture. If my emotional body says, "Hey guys, I know we got a lot of work to do, but can we all just take a knee? Can we just bring it in? Just group hug. All right, let's be in the emotion. Come on, everybody, let's go be in the emotions. You see, let's go do that because that's the nurturing that it needs right now. Now, your Western sense of thought and progression towards civilization doesn't provide any room or space for that because it can't be monetized. So because that can't, if I go to the gym and I work out and I got big muscles and I can lift a bunch of heavy junk, I can monetize that. That makes me a man. Now go lift up something. But meanwhile, when I see wealthy men in this country, they have such delicate features. Something you always notice about wealthy men. Wealthy men never have long hair. They never have rough hands. And they never have the grizzled, macho, brawny look that we tend to put on such a pedestal as it relates to expressions of masculinity. They never look like that. They don't need to look like that because they've tricked you into being that so that you can be their workhorses. So, I know we kind of bounce to a lot of different places in terms of this way of thinking and this way of presenting an idea, but I wanted to touch upon that and really speak about the understanding of the melanin rich worldview, and just understand, like I said, there are other people who can derive a conception of higher ideas that may be more encompassing than our own or than the Western one. God is not a magical word. How many people before they were indoctrinated were taught that there were different words for this high divinity, that there were West African words, there were East African words, your Yahuwah, your Elohim, your Elion. Those are East African words. And you have complements in those on the West too. You constantly see that Yah, Yah, Yah. You see, who knew that before you went to college? Who knew that before you graduated high school? Before you received their indoctrination, did you know that? Were you taught that at home? Were you homeschooled? Did your parents teach you a proper conceptualization of your African self or of your indigenous self? Were you taught that? Even if you're one who, comes from South America, Latin America, were you taught the word indigenous before you were taught something like Taino or taught something like Latino or Hispanic? Which Latino, Hispanic, neither one of them are respectful or proper references to the indigenous people of North America or South America or Central America. And I'm using the term America more than I am America, right? So it's the indoctrination that we have to start to look at when we start to conceptualize all of these teachings. So even when I'm speaking and I hear people sometimes express a bit of confusion because they feel that I should be coming from a certain perspective based on a little bit of me that they maybe have thought that they understood. So, like I've had people say before, like, you used to speak about the African perspective. If you don't, oh God, that's like saying, do you believe in God? Like everything about that sentence is wrong. Everything about that sentence is wrong. The problem is when someone takes something of yours and they teach you to hate what's yours, then you never come back to the right way of being. Or some people just demonize. They won't even take it because they can't hold on to it. Not everybody could touch Kundalini energy, even though the term Khazar means those who handle snakes. Khazar. Not everyone can handle the heat. Not everyone can handle it. So they demonize those who can handle the heat, or they demonize those who can speak to ancestors. Oh, you Negro, Necro, you dead object, right? And, I'm not dead, but I can speak to the dead naturally. Don't need any tools, but I can speak to them. Because my conception of time is different than the Western conception of time. The Western conception of time is that whatever is in the past is in the past, is done. Whereas in the Eastern conception of time is that it's all one cyclical spiral. So I can speak to my ancestors. I can speak to those who are coming. I speak to those who've already been here. And I can speak to those who are here right now. And it's a triplicity in that, between what is forthcoming, what has been, and what is. And I can exist and communicate on each plane and link those planes together, because I am the culmination of both. You see? But from a Western perspective, that's just a bunch of gobbledygook. It's just a bunch of foolishness. So, it's important sometimes not sometimes, but all the time, especially if you're listening to someone like me, you're going to hear concepts and ideas that may kind of take you in different directions. And if you're not looking at it from a contextual view, that is a contextual view of divinity, then it will get confusing, and you may not understand it. You may hear me speak about Islam and think that I have any allegiance to Arab nations, and I don't at all, whatsoever, at all. When I speak about Islam, I speak of ancient Islam, and ancient Islam is no different than ancient Israel culture. Ancient Israel culture is not the Jayish culture that you see today. I don't, when you speak about being God's chosen people, you are, but of what God? What God chose you? Because I'm an Israelite. So yeah, and then you might say, well, how are you an Israelite? But then you also talking about Olodumare, and yeah, man, your context is off. No different than the early followers of Yahushai. They followed what they called the direct. Direct. In Arabic, we have the Tarek or Tariq. And in our Buddhist understandings, we have the Tao. They all mean the same thing, the way. So they were not called Christians. They were called followers of the way. Right? But you have this concept of the way in many different systems. I am followers of the way. Well, what the heck is the way? The way is what I'm teaching you, so that you will have the mind that Christ has. But if Christ was the Word, and the Word was in the beginning, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and I'm supposed to have the mind of that, then you're telling me I'm supposed to have the mind of God. That's the way? That's the way. And there have been different people in different geographic hemispheres who have been able to conceptualize what the way may be. But interesting, they all called it the same thing, the way. So if I was to say that to someone, well, I follow the Tao, what would someone probably say? Oh, see, that's your problem right there, brother. That's your problem right there. I follow the way. Well, why didn't you say that? Maybe I didn't feel like saying it in English today. Maybe that's why. What are you conceptualizing? What are you using as your framework for understanding? You see? And it's not something that you grab overnight. Like I've said so many times, it takes time. It takes effort. It takes putting energy forth. It takes meditation daily, every morning, every afternoon, every evening. What are you submerging yourself in? When you turn to the Creator and the Most High with your whole heart, as we were instructed, your whole heart. See, that's not the same as like, oh, I grew up in church. My grandmother's taking me to church. That's not your whole heart. I got baptized. Why'd you get baptized? And, I just felt like it was time, man. I'm getting older, man. I gotta, get things right with the big guy upstairs. That's not your whole heart. Your whole heart makes you look like a weirdo. That's your whole heart. And the only people who are comforted by your arrival are other weirdos. That's your whole heart. When you're walking around with tassels on, or you sisters are walking around with long dresses and your hair covered, or you got headbands on and you got tassels on, you look like a weirdo. People be looking at you like, yo, that look like the bottom of somebody's curtain. That look like my grandmother's drapery treatment on your shirt. Why you wearing curtain treatments on your shirt? You look weird. Yeah. But when I'm walking down the street and I see another person with drapery treatments on their clothes, I'll be like, yo, shalom. And people walking by, man, look at these two weirdos. Yeah, whole heart. And I'm not saying that those things make you official, because too many people hide behind their costumes. That's the problem with the modern day church. Everybody's got their suits on. So they hide behind their suits. And you assume as soon as you see the suit, as soon as they say, I believe in God, and you see a suit on, you're like, oh, okay, all right. Let me back it up. I got to step to you right, because I know you want. Yeah, I know you want. They hide, and a lot of people, they hide behind that costume. So I think that there's great power in sometimes removing the costume and seeing what the person is standing on. Are they standing on any works? And is the costume something that is immediately acceptable to the larger society? Because if your wardrobe or your speech or your culture makes the oppressive society comfortable, then it is the oppressive culture. The oppressive society sees all culture other than its own as just other than, and that other then becomes an object. If you have not been objectified by the more dominant society, then you going right along with the plan. Their whole point in objectifying you is to destroy you. Once something is objectified, you can do whatever you want to it. That's the whole point in objectification. You could be as brutal as you want after you objectify someone and say, oh, they're a thug, or they're an insurgent, or whatever. 3 insurgents were killed. Oh, well, they're insurgents. That's what happens, when you're an insurgent, right? Or 3 race haters, or, whatever term you want to use to objectify people. Once you can objectify them, or you call them savages, then you can treat them however you want to treat them. The Knights Templar showed that. They were going around and converting people, but, violating women, violating children, because they were infidels. So they've objectified them as infidels, so you can do whatever you want with them. It's not the same crime as if you were to do this against a Christian believing woman, or a God-fearing woman, or a God-fearing child. That's different. But an infidel is just an object. Do whatever you want with it. You see? So in our studies, it's important to take a hard look at, the perspective that we're coming from. And for me, as an Afro-Shemitic man, as I've said many times, my perspective is not going to be based around what you may see the dominant society do that may look similar. Some things you're going to do the same. Right now, I'm speaking in a language that others may speak in. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm culturally or ideologically aligned with them. Just using similar verbiage, So you have to be able to stand firm on a perspective that's rooted in the worldview of your greatest and most intelligent ancestral energy. And of course, the world will always tell you to stay away from it. It will always be, your ancestors will always be demonized. And the ones that will be upheld will be the Nikki Giovanni's, the Jane Baldwin, the Jane, that was That was a fitting slip. the, the James Baldwins of the world, even the Martin Luther Kings of the world, these are the ones that will always be upheld because of their ability to align you with the imperatives and the initiatives and the programs of that larger society. You're not going to hear much about Nat Turner. That Nat Turner isn't going to be spoken about as much, or Denmark Vesey, as much. You're not going to hear certain names come up as much, or even certain time period, or Siete Rayo, or certain time periods of how people were thinking, of Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, you know. But other ones will, and you have to ask yourself, well, why is this one being spoken about so much? Why are we still talking about Tupac so much? So many years later, his impact. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. Let's be honest at some point. Why don't we talk about Peter Tosh that much? Let's be honest. And if anyone's unfamiliar with Peter Tosh, go look at a picture of Peter Tosh, and you can answer that question. I don't even have to speak about his philosophies or his work or his initiative. Just go look at him. Just look at him. You don't know why we talk about Bob Marley a whole lot more than Peter Tosh. See, if you don't understand your divine context, one thing that you'll never realize and wake up to is the fact that we are at war. Too many people are just too comfortable. You're chilling. You're just chilling. You forgot. Because we ain't seen no fist pumping in the air in a while. And when we did, it was just from clowns, some idiots, scam artists, grifters. So you actually forgot. So they took away the steam through their blasphemy of the liberation movement. You forgot that we're actually at war. And that anyone that's put in front of you and that is heralded by the larger society, that's a part of a war tactic. That ain't nothing but a war tactic. We are still at war. You see. I mean, you got most of your demonic work that was done by these hip hop soldiers. I love hip hop. I mean, I'm a hip hop person, but for a lot of these people who we uphold as the greatest, I look at, I just gotta say it, like your Puffies and hell, there's a bunch of them. Some of them I really like. Jermaine Dupri's, put in front of us a lot of mediocre talent. People who could barely sing. Some of them were okay rappers, or they always had like one really good person on their label, and then the rest of the people would doodle. And they changed the landscape of what you understood talent to be. Because many of them were not that talented. I've been in the studio with some of these mega producers who people, this one, they got an ear for me. No, they don't have an ear for music. No, they don't. They were financed and put in position by oppressors to destroy our art. Put this person in place who could barely sing. Put this person in place who speaks against everything that Afro-Shemitic men and Afro-Shemitic women are supposed to stand for. Put the exact opposite. So let's look at Elijah Muhammad and let's look at Mother Clara. Let's study them. Now let's create music, artists that are the exact opposite of that. The exact opposite. And let's put millions and millions of dollars in their pocket. sending the message that everyone else has to be that thing in order to get on. And only push that. Don't push this. Give groups like Kindred, the Family Soul, just a little bit of money. Just enough. Don't give them too much. Just a little bit. Or the sister Natalie from Flowetry, the Flow Assist. Just give a little bit. Because she wants to stand for something. Give her a little bit. Don't give her too much. Or don't give her anything. Let everybody say, what happened to that? Well, she's married. She's got a family. Oh, and you don't give her nothing. You see? Yeah, we're at war. And there are so many different strategies for warfare, whether it be the feminist movement pushed by people like Nikki Giovanni, or whether it be the way our food is, if you want to call it such, is presented to us, or how we're told that our houses are supposed to be, how our clothes are supposed to be, how our language is supposed to be, how our training, or what you may call education, is supposed to be. You can never forget one very important reality is that we are at war and we are still in the middle of a battleground. There's nothing that you're given here that is ever going to produce a greater reality for you that is going to equalize the power dynamic between you and the rich oligarchs who run society. It's not over. It's still happening. I don't know what year you thought it ended. Maybe when Obama came into office or something, but that was a part of it. It never ended. So when you're listening to someone like me, or you're exploring information like I may provide, you need to approach it from that perspective. We are at war. And there is a larger worldview. And this man, speaking third person, Chief Yuya, is always coming from an Afro-Shemitic worldview that promotes complementarity of forces rather than the conflicting of forces. His worldview is completely different than the Western worldview that thrives on conflict. Answers arrive out of conflict. A winner must be born out of conflict, as opposed to the weak and the strong. They have a complementary relationship of yin and yang with one another. So if you understand that, then you'll understand the flow, of why we would have snow and why we would have rain, why we would have hail, why we would have sleet. They are not forces that are fighting against each other for dominance, but rather they are working within a complementary system. And no difference when you're seeing the relation of men and women. For me, being one who has been perfecting polygyny, over decades, there are people who will make the immediate assumption, because they're thinking from a very greedy and sick Eurocentric mind, that, oh, you're doing that for sex, or you're doing that because you're controlling these women. You see, well, you tell me now immediately the bag you're working out of. Because you could never imagine that an Afro-Shemitic man is doing what he's doing for covering. Maybe the women needed covering. Maybe I just have a good heart and I'm covering women who need to be taken care of. But that could never, ever, ever be the perspective, because that's not what your European sky daddy taught you. If it's not us, then it's inferior, and it's something evil to it. Or here's another one. You know how many women have approached me? That could never be, no, he's out here looking for, you see, because that's the ideation that's given to you. And like I've said so many times, if you use some reason, you know that you could actually get more sex without devoting yourself. When you have a woman who is in your family, you have to teach her. You have to cover her. You have to protect her. When there's problems, you have to work through it with her. You have to give her a solution. It's a lot of work. Think about if you just have one, and you say you got one sister and she's going through a string of bad fortune, right? And you may have a year where it's just like stuff just keeps happening and you got to keep working her through that to get her out of that. Now multiply that by 5 or 6, or let's just keep it low numbers, by 2. You got 2 of those. How much do you feel like having sex after all of that? Now compare that to someone who's just on Tinder all day, or Hinge, I think is another one, whatever apps, and they just, yeah, I like that, I like that, I like that, I like that, and they just got all kind of women lined up, and there's no obligation. That's for sex. If a man gets 2 wives, he's only having sex with 2 people. That's nothing. That's nothing. 2 people for a man with a healthy libido. For me, that's like nothing. Sex with 2 people, and you say, "Oh, you in it for sex?" If I was in it for sex, I'd be one of those tender guys, where you got 8 or 9 lined up every 7 days or so, because it's now we live in a time where there's no sexual morality, so you don't have to really. It's not like you got to jump through hoops. You don't have to cover somebody and protect them and be spiritually responsible for them and do all this stuff to have sex with them. So those are just very stupid responses that people are giving by their masters to say. And the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Never upped its formula. The formula is the exact same: still, kill, destroy. So you don't even get any more sophisticated sort of responses. It's always the same stupid responses. Oh, they doing that for sex. Oh, those women got low self-esteem. Oh, they ain't happy. I know they ain't happy. It's just like the same nonsense. My ancestors built empires. And we spend so much time being distracted by stupid Western things and celebrity gossip and celebrity news and whatever stupidness. We forget that we are empire builders. That's why people always wanted the Afro-Shemitics to come to their land, even if they had to kidnap them and enslave them, because they knew Afro-Shemitics were nation builders. So I'm looking at what my ancestors have done and do today, those who are not ancestors, to build nations. I don't give a F about what slaves got to say. I could care less about what a slave has to say about me, who is a nation builder. All right, with that, thank you, Toda Rabah, for sharing this time with me, and for sharing this time with ANU Life Global Ministries and ANU Nation. And as always, I want to give a show of love and support to all those who have signed up and are in the pipeline, and all those who are thinking about signing up and joining this beautiful, beautiful community of knowers and this beautiful community of doers. Okay? It's about nation building. And it's about nation building among spiritually balanced people. There's no idolizing on any level that's happening here, and there's no fetishizing on any level that's happening here. We're putting the work in, we're putting our faith in front of that and our faith behind that, in order to reclaim what it is that our ancestors have promised and that our Most High Yah has empowered us to be and to do. All right? So I want to thank you all for riding along. This will be our last full insight, I think. Look at the calendar, but I think of 2024, and we'll be returning for more of that wisdom and more gems to share with you and offer to you all. All right? Until such time, shalom.